New is old before we even find out about it. Well, tonight on Evening Edition, we'll bring you up to date with what's the latest big trend in the pop culture. Appropriately, it's called New Wave. Reporters John Rosak and Randy Schultz have prepared a special team report on the New Wave explosion.
New Wave is the sound of today and the look of now. It represents the first coherent counterculture to emerge in America since the hippie days. Like the 1960s youth culture, New Wave is decidedly anti-establishment, out to shock the staid and accepted. New Wave now is permeating popular culture on a number of fronts, in theater, fashion, video, magazines, and most of all, music. The first onslaught of New Wave came a few years back with those scruffy punk rock bands from the English working classes. With its growing mass appeal, New Wavers now come from all backgrounds, like the Lloyd's. Lulu Lewis and Ronnie Perillo were students at Polytechnic High School in San Francisco when they dropped out to start an acid rock band back in 1967. Later, they went to the folk singing route at Fisherman's Wharf and even worked the Burlingame Beef and Brew circuit before they finally formed this popular local New Wave group.
New Wave really is just an attitude. It's a fresh attitude. It's all your emotions pulled into one and brought through in the music. It's a New Wave lyric. It's more bent. Well, it's dirtier. Yeah.
Unlike punk, the music is supposed to be accessible, even somewhat commercial, drawing heavily on the beat of the mid-60s British rock invasion. But then there's that New Wave twist, the surly iconoclasm of the 80s. New Wavers say the idea is to be, well, bent.
Bent, 80s is angry. Look what we've grown up with, you know, all the war and the riots and all the turmoil, and the music is reflecting it, as art always does.
You're not my type, you're impolite, you're not sincere. You're out of line, you waste my time, you smell like beer.
Now is the time for people to be able to bring that out in music, hostility, pain, all the sexuality, all those things, bring it out in music now.
Get used to this beat. It's what you'll be hearing in the dance halls, on the radios, and in the record stores.
Last year, I think there might have been 1 or 2, 3 significant New Wave albums. Now there's hundreds. Every major record company is jumping on the bandwagon, so to speak, and signing 5, 10, 15 New Wave artists or bands, whatever you want to call it, and releasing just tons of records.
The last big music trend, disco, is rapidly dying. Record store owners say that disco records don't sell as much anymore, so you'll be hearing less of disco on the radio too. Meanwhile, music leaders say that New Wave music is selling 100 to 1 more this year than last. Radio playlists now are packed with New Wave music, but then even the businessmen say that New Wave represents a lot more than just a musical trend.
With the punk or the New Wave, there's definitely something for the kids to use to get back at their parents, just like the hippies use smoking marijuana.
24 hours to go. I wanna be sedated.
New Wave has taken over more than just the record stores or the airwaves. Take the Stud here, south of Market in San Francisco. Monday nights aren't usually a hot night for a bar of any variety, but New Wave has taken over the Stud on Monday nights, and the crowds are jumping. With disco fading, the big trend in dancing right now is called dance-oriented rock, or just DOR. A number of major San Francisco dance halls are dropping disco music and playing DOR. Now, instead of the formalized, refined dance steps of disco, bopping has returned, and the shock value does not end on the dance floor.
This recent new wave fashion show called Extremes was a study in the outrageous. Early punk dress was infamous for dyed hair and ears pierced with safety pins. New wave fashion is less self-mutilating, although faces and hair are airbrushed in rainbow colors to give it an otherworldly look.
You're the designer of the costume you're wearing. What do the tubes represent?
It's a concept of bathing without getting wet.
Externalization?
That's right.
Who designed the dress you're wearing?
Magenta.
This is magenta.
Yes, I'm so lucky.
Damage magazine is one aspect of the new wave scene that's still definitely punk. According to them, they're the mouthpiece of the politics and philosophy of the punk bands.
We want to be able to support the bands, keep them going, give them publicity, so that they don't have to sell out to the corporate monoliths. You know, we write about the ideology behind punk rock, the experience, the politics, everything that goes along with it.
Jane Hamsher is assistant editor of Damage. She's 20 and has fled suburbia for this Mission District warehouse where she and a group of like-minded writers put together Damage magazine. While new wave is seen by many as the next pop style to be packaged and sold to the public, Target Video is in the process of chronicling the movement by videotaping its bands and artists in public places.
The whole idea of showing or doing your performances in museums, galleries was getting old. It just wasn't working, and it was the same audience all the time. So people moved from that type of theater into public places like clubs and things like that. Some people have no opinion, but there are a lot that are very, very concerned about what's going on around them, about war and all the crap that they have to confront daily. And the type of politics that they interact within right here in this own community, you know.
Would you call that new wave?
No, that's punk, because it's basically an attitude. It's very strong, and quite often it's just, you know, it's out there. It's dramatic. New wave is just a burn off, a residue. It's like if you can't market punk, so you market new wave.
Target also tapes kinetic art by Mark Pauline. Here, a machine knifes newspaper photos of Soviet Premier Brezhnev, while his papier-mâché head spits blood. This anti-establishment view of art also finds a corollary in avant-garde theater, like Snake's Ride Hard, Die Fast.
Can't walk like a boy, can't drive like an old lady. I'm a man.
The same posturing and hard look of the lone individual against the system is a throwback to 50s anti-heroes like James Dean and Brando. But it's colored by a distrust of all authority, yet ultimately unified by the hard-driving beat of the music.
Music, dance, fashion, art, but most of all, an attitude. Its subculture has not yet reached the proportions of the 60s flower children, but it's exploding as a cultural phenomena and emerging as something of a sign of a raucous decade ahead.
That's a follow-up to S&M, it's a new wave.
Not exactly, but really, there are a couple of questions, Randy, right off, or for you, John. Number one, I'm still not sure where the difference is between punk and this, and how can something be fresh and dirty at the same time?
Punk was the beginning of it. Punk started 2 or 3 years ago, was the beginning of it. New wave, it's a much more commercialized, much more accessible. I think if we can draw an analogy to the hippie days, back in the hippie days, the only way it could be a true hippie was to drop LSD every day, drop out, and tune in and go to your be-in every day. Okay, that would be the extreme. That's maybe what the punks are now. They're really in that extreme trip. The counterculture, on the other hand, in the 60s was what most people got into. It was much more moderate, much more of the mass acceptance. That's what new wave is much more the mass acceptance. The punks are isolated enclaves of maybe a few thousand in various cities. New wave is selling millions of records and affecting millions of people.
Can we count on new wave to last as long as punk?
I'd say that because it's mass, I think it's going to last longer.
John, I want to know if you really think that, I mean, is that art, what you were showing us there?
Oh, yeah, I definitely
really
think so.
Huh?
It depends on what your concept of art is, and art extends from performance art to art in the opera house.
And the thing is that that art is more akin to punk because the people who call themselves punk are basically the younger people, the more outraged people, the alienated, the ones who have a message that they want to get across either through their art or through their video or through the music, which is outrageous in some groups' performances. I'm
reminded by your question of when a very famous literary critic once saw Bob Dylan, and he said, it's very interesting, but is it art? And at that point, now nobody would argue that Bob Dylan was art, and I think at some point in the future
well, that's why I wanted John to make a statement in case somebody was wondering.
Well, there's a more interesting question, is it punk art? It's a matter of degrees. A new wave is a degree of punk that is commercialized, a commercial degree. It's what society in general is looking at and picking up on. It's the next phase.
You really connect Mark Pauline's work, and I've seen a number of, his displays, you know, machines chewing up radios and things, and faces exploding. You connect that definitely with the music. I mean...
Yeah, you do. I'm glad you said that because you get the feeling when you see this outrageous statement, you're knifing authority, you're discharging all authority.
Oh, but it's a certain kind of authority.
The question,
possibly.
The real question is, are they sort of unlike the hippies in the 60s and the early 70s, and then I think they were considered from liberal to left-wing radical? Are the new wave people conservative even way off the end to the right? Because, I mean, here you were knifing Brezhnev. It's definitely an anti-Brezhnev statement.
Well, but he's authority. Brezhnev is authority, Carter's authority. It's against that.
Carter,
listen, I'm going to return to my world. You guys over there, okay? And Stanley and I think we can talk about something. Stanley's back here tonight.
Stanley,
lucky me for us. Second time this